Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us today on our webinar, Tips, Myths, and the Big Picture, Advice from Dental School Admissions Officers. We're delighted you could join us today. My name is Elizabeth Wright, and I manage the Go Dental initiative here at ADIA. So first and foremost, I want to extend a very special welcome to our three panelists, Annette McMurry from the Ohio State University College of Dentistry, Lamont Lowery from East Carolina University School of Dental Medicine, and James Betbeze from the University of California, San Francisco School of Dentistry. Thank you, panelists, and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Okay. So just a couple of very small housekeeping items before we get started. So to minimize background noise, all attendees are in listen-only mode. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to all registered attendees by tomorrow. And finally, I promise we will have plenty of time at the end of the session for Q&As, so please send in your question using the questions box on the right-hand side at any time during the webinar. So without further ado, let's begin. Annette, I'll begin with you.
Great.
In September 2014, Urban Universities for Health released a national study on holistic admissions in the health professions, which showed that dental schools reported some of the highest numbers in using holistic admissions review. One of the findings of the study suggests that holistic review is an effective strategy for schools that seek to increase diversity of their student bodies and develop an inclusive, positive learning environment that supports student success. Hearing this, could you please describe for attendees what holistic admissions is all about?
Sure. The simplest way to describe holistic admissions is that we look at the entire applicant, not just the numbers. So we really look at the broad breadth of the application. So taking into consideration a student's life experiences, their involvement in the community, their engagement in volunteer organizations, things kind of beyond the normal numbers, the DAT and the GPA. Not to minimize the fact that those are important aspects of our applications, but that really we're taking into consideration everything that candidate is bringing to the table, which is important to us. It helps us to shape our class and shape the future of the profession.
Great. Thanks so much, Annette. So what role does holistic admissions play in the dental school application process?
It's an important role. Like I said, it allows us to shape our class and shape the profession. So when we're looking at bringing in a class every year, we're taking into consideration kind of the missions and the goals of our individual schools, taking into consideration those things that are important to us. One of the things that I constantly go back to with my admissions committee is, what are we looking for in a student? It is important that they can perform once they're here, but not always the academics doesn't necessarily correlate with strong performance in dental school, and strong performance doesn't necessarily mean academic performance. It also is that ability to interact with our patients, to interact with our classmates, to interact with our faculty. So how can we, as we're going through this admissions process, get to some of those types of life skills or, kind of non-cognitive factors, the things that the numbers don't necessarily tell us.
Great. Thanks so much, Annette. So how does holistic admissions benefit students?
Well, I think it benefits students in two ways. One, during the admissions process that allows us to look, like I said, at the entire applicant. The second is, once the student is here and actually in the profession, how we shape those entering classes will ultimately impact how the profession shapes up. So kind of going back to that first fact of how it benefits them during the admissions process. So let's say a student who maybe during their first year, for whatever reason, struggled academically. In the holistic admissions process, we can look beyond that total GPA and look more at the trending grades and how that student did as they progressed through their academics. One thing that we do here at Ohio State is really take into consideration those last 45 academic hours. That gives us a current snapshot of where that student is today academically. We also are able to look at it, the things kind of that the student was involved in, whether they worked while they went to school, whether they were involved in student organizations. Bringing in a well-rounded, diverse class will make the educational experience for the student a better one. If everyone looked the same and everyone came from the same background, I don't think that the time in dental school would be as fulfilling or rewarding. And also taking into consideration kind of what the practice will look like in the future. As our population diversifies and the needs of our population change, we have to consider those things as we're putting our classes together. So, I think it benefits the students both when they're in school, when they are going through the admission process, and ultimately when they're in the practice.
Great. That's a great explanation, Annette. So how can students prepare their applications to best fit in with holistic review?
I always say put your best foot forward. This is your opportunity to shine. Don't be shy. Every student has a unique story. Every student is bringing their experiences to the table. This is not the time to be humble and to hide things. Make sure that you're thoughtful when you put your application together. What are the things that you're including in your extracurricular and co-curricular activities that you're, putting on your ADSAS application? Make sure that you research the schools you're interested in. It's important to understand where you're applying and what are the things that those schools are looking for. Most schools do have a secondary application, and often in those secondary applications there will be questions that are targeted and are really specific for that school. So take the opportunity when you're filling out that application to be thoughtful in those answers. I think the other part is you kind of build your application, you're putting everything together. Think about who writes your letters of recommendation. Make sure that you know those professors or you know the practitioner well. Don't just go to somebody because you got an A in that class, but go to somebody who knows your character and your work ethic and that really can help to expand on the story you've already told us. That often what we'll see in letters of recommendation are things that students have talked about, but that professor or that practitioner will take the opportunity to expand upon it. The other important part of the application, and I think this is really an opportunity for a student to shine, is in that personal statement. I like to think of that personal statement as the phone interview before the actual interview. It really gives us an opportunity to get to know the applicant on a more personal level. One thing that I encourage students to avoid is kind of the generic cliche, I want to be a dentist because ... We read thousands of applications each admission cycle, and we see a lot that say, I want to be a dentist because. You can imagine the stories. I fell from my bike and broke out my front tooth. Yes, that's an important part of your personal statement, but it should not be your entire personal statement. Your personal statement is an opportunity for you to distinguish yourself from the 1,000+ applications that we all receive annually. So really take that opportunity and make sure that it is your work product. Take the time to write it and to edit it. Yes, it's okay to use some of those resources on campus to make sure that you're doing a good job with your writing, but make sure that it is your work product. The personal statement, I think often for us in the admissions world can be a tiebreaker. It really is the opportunity for us to get to know you and to see if you would be a good fit, at least in that initial kind of process. The other thing is that you each have something to bring. You each have a unique story. Make sure that you take the opportunity to tell that story.
Great. Thank you so much, Annette.
Thank you.
Lamont, you're up next. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
So in October 2015, ADIA published a white paper entitled Find the Right Fit, which offered students tips on finding the best dental school for them, which included information such as, factors beside cost of the curriculum, location, professional development, and opportunities outside the classroom. In addition to what I just mentioned, what other factors should students consider when contemplating which dental school to attend?
Well, I think they should always consider the mission and vision of that school. They should check to see if that mission and vision line up with their personal goals, or their personal mission and vision. That's very important. Can't imagine being at a school that totally doesn't line up with what I want to do as a dental student. So mission and vision are very, very, very important, and the curriculum as well. Some of the schools have curriculum where they work in small groups a lot, and others not. May have large class sizes. So it's important that you check those things out. Again, you're going to be here for at least 4 years, so you want to make sure that those 4 years are pleasant.
Perfect. So, in your opinion, what are the two most important factors students should weigh when considering dental school?
I might have mentioned the two most in my opinion.
Okay.
Certainly mission and vision are very, very important. I can't stress that enough, and maybe that's simply from my school's background, but the mission of the school is very important, and I think that prospective students should look at that. But there's some other factors. Certainly curriculum and finances. Well, how much is it going to cost? I'm planning to go work in an underserved area, but if I go to a private school X or out-of-state school X and it costs me this amount of money, am I really setting myself up for a long, hard road, or am I really setting myself up to receive great education and to be able to do what I want to do as it aligns with my goals in life? So mission and vision are very important to me. That curriculum as well, what types of other programs or academic support programs, those are important as well when looking at a school. Not everybody's going to be that student that doesn't need to ask anything outside of the regular class hours. You're gonna need to go to some offices to have some tutoring sessions, one-on-one sessions, if you will. So it's important to know that those things exist, and I think in most schools they do, but you want to know what they look like. Some other factors, maybe we can get into that in some other questions, I'm not sure, but some other factors are diversity. To be quite honest, you want to know what the makeup, not just of the student base, but what's the makeup of the faculty and the staff as well. It's times are changing now, so you want to make sure that whatever your stance in life is, that it is warmly received.
Great, Lamont. Thank you so much. So one more question to consider. Kind of on the opposite end of the scale, highlight for us a couple of things students should avoid doing when they're researching which dental schools to apply to.
So certainly I think they should avoid holding up Student Doctor Network as the holy grail of all information. Certainly there are some additive bonuses to that, as well as even with friends or people who attend the school. But don't put so much stock into how they feel about school X as it relates to how you might feel about it. Go experience the school. Don't just show up. I would not accept an offer from a school that I had not visited outside of my interview. I would certainly go and see how life is outside of interview day. Because interview day we put our best face on, so to speak. So you want to see how things are flowing. Talk to the janitors, talk to the staff members, the people that maybe don't make a decision at all about your admissions. So I would not go in with a sort of a preconceived notion of, oh well, this school is about this or about that. Just be open-minded You never know really what school will be your best fit, but it is truly important to find the best fit for, again, 4 years minimum that you're going to be at these places living and breathing these people, your classmates, and so it's important that you make sure that you can fit. So if they have other opportunities for you to go and meet your classmates, meet the faculty and staff, certainly take advantage of that. Do not just say, well, I'm just going to show up on orientation day. I hope that helped answer that question.
No, that was perfect. Thank you very much. I think it's always important to cover what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. So thanks very much. Great. So James, you're up. A big welcome and thanks for joining us. So let's talk myths. As you know, there are several misconceptions out there about applying to dental school, such as in order to get into dental school, you must have a parent or a family member who's been a dentist. I'm sure you've heard this myth and many others on numerous occasions. So, in your experience in admissions, what's the most common myth surrounding the dental school application process?
Well, I think to follow up from Lamont, it would be that studentdoctor.net has a lot of accurate information. Might be a common myth, but probably the one I hear the most often is that you have to have a biology major or another science major in order to be competitive. And that's not true for definitely for our school and for many of the other schools that I've spoken to, there are representatives. Get the major that you want to get, that you enjoy, because you're going to perform in it a lot better, and you'll find a way to make that applicable. Don't feel that you have to get a certain type of major. So that's probably the number one myth. Number two, I think, would be that an A grade, if you get a letter from a professor whose course you got an A in, you will get a great letter, and that's not always the case. What coordination you have with the individual who writes the letter, and sometimes it's more important to get a letter from someone who knows why you didn't get that A in their course, for example, because they know the circumstances behind that. A thing that I run into a lot of times also is people will often use the class demographics that are posted on a website to decide this is what a school has a preference for, a certain type of student, certain majors, certain residency factors, things like that. And I think the reality is that the demographics on the web page are often more a reflection of who applies to the school rather than a preference on the part of the school. And so I always say you should contact the school directly and find out exactly what it is they're looking for, or if this is a preference, or if this is a requirement. Don't make those assumptions. You don't really have a basis for the assumptions. And you really want to check out the information directly and find out what's the case with that. I would think another one that I hear often is, you tell us to apply early, so I have to get my application in on June 1st, and if I don't get it in on June 1st, I'm not going to be competitive. Okay. It's true that we want you to apply early, but there are some things that you have to consider when you're deciding upon what date you're going to submit your application. So, for example, if you have spring grades that are still pending, it's not to your advantage to submit your application on June 1st if you don't have those grades to post in your application, because the next opportunity you'll have to enter those grades is going to be the academic update window, which is in December or January. And by that time, many schools have already made the majority of their interview decisions, and you want those grades to be factored in. So wait for things like that. Or if you're retaking the DAT, you may want to consider delaying a few days to make sure you make the application the best it can be. Let's see. Another one I get, since we are a state school, is that state schools only accept residents. And the reality is that that policy varies from school to school, and you really have to check with every school. Some schools are mandated by their state legislature, and there's a certain percentage they have to accept of state residents. Others are very open about that. For example, at UCSF, we don't have a minimum California residence that we have to admit. Yet if you go to our webpage and look at the entering class, you'll see that the vast majority of the students are California residents, but that's more often a factor of how many California residents apply and how many out-of-state applicants decline our offer. So, and then also, individuals who are admitted from out of state can qualify for residency in almost all cases. So always check these things out with the schools. Great.
Lots of myths out there, aren't there? So in addition to what I mentioned earlier, could you give us, you talked a little bit about this, but are there any specific ones that, in the last 2 or 3, dental school cycles, students have, you've heard students, students have come back to you and said, I heard this myth, this can't possibly be true. Do you have any concrete examples of, what you've heard in recent application cycles about myths that students have brought back to you?
You need research to be competitive at any dental school. And that's one that I hear a lot, and it's not true, even if the school has a big research program.
Okay. Any other ones?
I think the ones that I've mentioned have been some of the, well, I guess let's go to holistic review again. There's a myth that people feel that if a school is employing holistic review, that the cognitive measures don't matter. And it's not that they don't matter, it's just that we look at them within the context of all the other factors of your application. And so definitely all of that is part of the application.
Okay, great. Perfect. And so, just to ensure a student has the correct information about the dental school application process, what are the top 3 resources you would recommend that they, check out to just make sure these myths aren't creeping into their, into their repertoire of the dental school application process?
Contact the schools directly. If you're going to apply to 10 schools, then you should talk to 10 schools. Start with the web page and make sure you can research the information that's there, but then contact them with an email or a phone call and verify if you have that specific question. Make sure that you have your prerequisites all lined up, because they're not the same at every school. There are some slight variations, and you want to check on that. I think letters of recommendation, all the schools don't require the same type of letter, and so you have to make sure that you're getting those requirements correct. Not all schools require 2 letters from science professors, for example, or something like that. And you just want to make sure that you know those. Every policy for every school you have, what I suggest to applicants is to create what's called an application plan, where you can track all of this information. However it is you do it best. For me, it's an Excel spreadsheet, because I like to cross-reference and link everything. For some people, it might be color-coded folders. Just make sure you have all that information in one area where you can look at your similarities and your differences, so that when you submit the application to ADSAS, you've met the requirements for all the schools. I think the worst thing that can happen is to get denied for an administrative reason, because you didn't follow an instruction or direction of what to submit, as opposed to having your file fully reviewed.
Sure. Great. Thank you. I think that's definitely something students might miss, so thank you for emphasizing that. So I only have one final question, then we'll open it up to the questions. I know Meg, my colleague here, is fervently writing down questions. So this question is really for all panelists. It's any final words of advice for our participants on the webinar today about applying to dental school. Annette, I will start with you, since you were our first panelist.
Have echoed. I also think that it is important, like James said, reach out to those schools that you're interested in. I always tell my students, how you're treated at the front door is how you'll be treated when you walk through the door. And that ties in with Lamont's, fit, that you want to find some place that you can fit. Other than that, put your best foot forward. Take the time when you're filling out the application. This is the first step in your professional career, and to make sure that it is the right step and that you are doing everything possible to make it happen.
Great. Thank you so much. How about you, Lamont?
So I won't add too much to what Annette said, but finding your fit, yes, and as well as not giving all of the cards to the dental school. In other words, you have value. You bring something to the table. So make sure that you're being yourself, and make sure that you're putting your best foot forward in your interviews. And again, I echo what Annette said. Any interaction you have with the dental school is very important. Understand that you're being interviewed or judged, if you will, from that moment forward. So certainly making sure that your interactions, whether you like the responses or not, making sure that your interactions are A++, would be beneficial to them.
Great. Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, how about you, James?
I have to go along with what both Annette and Lamont said. Key is to be yourself. Don't be who you think we want you to be, because you'll probably be wrong. Be yourself, and in the application, keep the focus on yourself, not on your mentor or the person you want to emulate. Keep it on yourself. That's who we're interviewing, and that's who we're considering admitting.
Great. Well, thank you very much, panelists, for your candor, and I think this was a lot of really great, valuable information. So I have a big list of questions, if you guys are ready to dive into some questions. Okay, so first question, we're going to start, I think, back at the top of the game with Annette on holistic admissions. So it's a great question. What are the opportunities for international students wanting to enter dental school? That might be a question that we can all answer, but I'll start with you, Annette.
So what are the opportunities?
For international students wanting to go to dental school in the U.S.
Okay, so this is a good question, and this ties back to that do your research. For us specifically, international students that are coming in, no background in dentistry, we will consider through our traditional DDS application process. For us, we are one of those schools that only accepts a certain percent from out of state, and our international students fall into that category. So those students would be treated just like our non-resident applicants through the admission process.
Great. Lamont or James, any further comments on that?
Go ahead, James.
Yep.
I would just say that it is important that for our school, we only admit residents of North Carolina. So as Annette said, do your research. There are schools and programs that if you come in with some previously you're a dentist in another country or what have you, there are schools that have sort of that advanced matriculation, but it's really about you doing your research. And I can't say it any better than that. Research the schools, look at the schools, because a lot of times they will call our offices and we'll talk with people about pretty much about anything. You know, we'll talk with you, but we can only, because we don't deal necessarily in international students, my information is very minimal. I can direct you towards, you know, other schools that accept and admit students that are internationally trained or just international students who want to start in dental school. For us at ECU, you have to be a resident of North Carolina, so that's your first step. Other schools have more, I guess, more room to accept internationally trained international students.
Great.
Nothing to add.
Oh, sure, please.
No, nothing to add. I think Annette and Lamont both covered it great.
Okay, great. Another question that came in is, how do admission standards differ for advanced standing programs? Is a similar approach adopted? Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
I'll speak.
Great.
I would say that the differences are just like the differences between the dental schools. You want to check directly with each of the programs. They have different requirements and different standards. Specialty programs tend to be extremely competitive because of their small size. But again, don't make assumptions and check with the programs to see what they're looking for.
Great. Annette, any comments?
Just to echo, do your research. You know, I stated we don't take anyone with advanced standing here at Ohio State. Like Lamont said, if we have somebody contact us, we can point them in the right direction. I think ADIA is a good resource to kind of start that search to determine what schools do accept students with advanced standing.
Perfect. How about you, Lamont? Any comments?
GoDental.org. That's a great resource.
Okay, great. So another question came in, is it acceptable to take prerequisites in the summer? Annette, I have you on the screen, so I'll ask you first.
Sure. For us, yes, it is. Again, always check with the schools that you're applying to. Some schools will require that certain prerequisites are taken at a four-year institution. So if you were thinking about over the summer taking one of those courses, maybe at a community college close to your home, or maybe you're considering taking it online, make sure that you check with each school because each school has different requirements when it comes to their prerequisites.
Great. James and Lamont, anything to add to that?
No, that was perfect.
That was perfect. Thank you, Annette. So this is an interesting question. An attendee asked, I worked at a full-time job while completing my full degree online. I planned my own semesters, so I finished earlier than a normally structured semester. Can I make a case for this in the interview? That's a very interesting question. How about Lamont? I'll go with you.
I think that anytime you get to talk about your ability to handle academics or handle academics and life is a great opportunity. Sometimes people as prospective students value things more so than admissions officers and schools value things. Again, my advice is to take your time, slow down, enjoy the journey, and if you're ready for dental school, then you're ready for dental school, and certainly talk about being able to handle the academics and life at the same time, but I don't have like a rating or it's here versus here, that type of thing. It's just one of those things, and it really depends on what that particular prospective student is looking for and what that school is looking for in a student.
Sure, great answer. Annette, any further comments on that?
I mean, I think, like Lamont said, it's always a good opportunity to talk about kind of that work-life balance. How are you able to work and go to school? I mean, I can't imagine doing it personally, so I think it's a great accomplishment. But I'll go back and say it again too, do some research and figure out kind of what are those schools looking for. Like James said earlier, don't be afraid to call and to talk to someone or to shoot an email just to see, kind of where their values lie with things like that. When you're in dental school, you will be a full-time student, and it will feel like you're a full-time student and working because it is a very heavy course load. So I think that work-life balance will bode well for someone who's bringing that experience to the table.
It's a great piece of advice. Thank you. And James, any thoughts on it?
Nothing to add. I think that was 2 perfect answers.
Great. This is a good question. I think it actually feeds into the myths category, so I'm going to have James start with this. Does it matter where an applicant went to undergrad? Do admissions committees take into account where you graduated from?
Well, I think that would probably vary from dental school to dental school. So we'll go back to that original bit of advice about contacting the schools directly. With holistic admissions, though, I think many schools are going to be looking at not just where you went to school, but they're looking at the entire aspect of your academic history. So not just what your major was or what your school was, but how many courses a term did you take? What were they comprised of? What were you doing when you were while you were in school or outside of school? And so it's a combination of factors. There's no yes or no answer. We don't have a reliable ranking system, and we don't use it at anything like that at UCSF to rank schools. There's just too many lists out there, and there's too many criteria that they use. So but check with the schools.
That's great. Lamont, any further thoughts on that?
Yeah, certainly check with the schools. Wherever you attend school, sometimes life dictates where we attend school. Do well. Just do well. It's what I find sometimes is people say, well, I had to take this class over here, but then you don't do well. Well, I don't care where you attend school at. I just want to know that you've done well as you can do. And certainly there are other factors when you're doing holistic reviews, which we do as well. There are other factors that at play, but certainly wherever you take classes that you want to do well. And there certainly are all kinds of rankings, as James said, out there. Understand a 4.0 at school X is not the same as a 4.0 at school Y. We get that. You get that as a student as well. But that's not the only factor. Not at all. Not even at the top of the list, honestly, for a lot of schools.
Great. Thank you. Annette, any comments on that?
No, I think the gentleman did a very good job at answering that question.
Great. Thank you. Well, Annette, I think this could be a question. You touched on this before, personal statements. One question was, how do we begin or start our personal statements?
That's a very good question. I would say it's a work in progress. Think about the things that, I guess think about your story. What about you is unique? And often people say, well, I don't have anything unique. I'm just an average Joe. And there isn't anything really unique or special about me. And I say, yes, there is. You just have to find it. Talk to your friends, talk to your family. Ask them questions. What stands out about me to you? Sit down and think about your life experiences. What are some of the things that you've done or that you've accomplished or that you've even enjoyed doing? What brought you to this point. I did say don't be the generic, I want to go to dental school because ... But there is a part of your story that lies in that. So just take time to really do a little bit of soul searching and think about what are those things that you want the admissions committee to know about you. Also, avoid your resume and prose. Often we will see a personal statement that basically reiterates what we just read in other parts of the application. So you don't want to repeat your resume. What you want to do is to tell us about something that we would not otherwise know about you as we went through that application. You're not going to write your personal statement overnight. You're probably going to have several drafts. Many moons ago, I went through the admission process to go to law school, and fast forward probably 3 or 4 years after I graduated, I found back then the disc that had my personal statements on it, and I went back and looked, and there was 3 or 4 different drafts before my final one that I submitted. So it really is a work in progress, and it does take time. Don't expect it to happen overnight.
Perfect. Lamont, do you have any further comments on that?
Yeah, just in a personal statement, it's about you, so there should be a person in the statement. Sometimes applicants will get so creative that they'll forget the person. They might start something with the sun rose in the east and the flowers and the birds were chirping. That we can lose you in some of that, and so you want to make sure that the person is there. And sometimes your story simply is, when I was a kid, I fell and I hit my front tooth and it broke, and so that sparked my interest. Sometimes that's your story, but get some people to read it, not mom and dad who love you and everything that comes out of your mouth. Get some people that can look at it critically, but make sure there's a person, and that's the biggest thing for me, is that I see you in your statement.
Right. That's great advice, Lamont. Thanks. How about you, James? Any further comments?
Well, I think people get bogged down on the word unique, and they're trying to find something that of every human being on the planet, are the only one who possesses it. And another way to approach that question is think of what your strengths are, of what your accomplishments are, things that you feel make you stand out. And that's really what's behind trying to establish what's unique, or what you have to offer. If you go to a dental school, if they admit you, what will you bring with you that will enhance the experience for your fellow classmates? What about interpersonal skills or characteristics as far as values and things like that will help inform who you are and how you do everything you do?
Great. That's perfect. Thank you so much. So I think this is a great question. How can you stand out as an out-of-state applicant when applying to a state school? I have you on there, James, so I'll start with you.
Well, for us, residency is not a factor when we're looking at admission. So that's one thing to check first off is, does it matter to the school if you're out-of-state applicant? And I think the approach would be the same. You want to just still show the qualities that you have to bring, the things that are your strengths, your accomplishments. I can relate it to the personal statement again. We talk about the story that gives you the initial motivation. You took the training wheels off the bike, or your dad did, and taught you how to ride the bike. You ran into a car door and you knocked your teeth out. That can be a sentence or two at the beginning of your statement. But what we're really interested in is who you are now and what you want to do with dentistry. So try and show that you've thought beyond getting into dental school, that you've given some thought to the scope of your practice, the type of practice, perhaps the type of patient population that you want to work with. You might also want to look at things like, what are you going to do when you immediately got out of dental school, maybe the first 5 years? What do you see yourself as having done 20 or 30 years down the line? So you have to extrapolate from where you feel dentistry is now as a profession to where maybe you think it's going. And that shows that you've really given a lot of long-term thought to the idea.
Great advice. Thank you. Annette, any comments there?
No, I think James said it perfectly. Unlike their school, we do take that residency into consideration. But, I mean, it really is about putting your best foot forward, whether you're an in-state or out-of-state applicant.
Great. Thank you. And Lamont, since you don't take out-of-state residents, maybe not a question you need to answer?
Not from my school, but I would say, again, make certain that you understand the cards in which you hold. You have value as an applicant. never give the school all the cards. I know we as admissions officers like to think, come, kiss the ring and all that stuff, right? But no, it's very important. You as an out-of-state student, you have value, and what do you bring to the school? I think it goes back to the earlier question. What do you bring to the school? Make sure that you can answer that as an out-of-state student as well.
Great, thank you. So another question we had is, how much do you weigh recommended, not required, but recommended courses when looking at applications? Annette, you want to tackle this one first?
We have 13 prerequisite courses that we require all of our students to complete prior to matriculating. Our recommended courses, I'll be honest, we really don't give any weight in the admission process for that. I think we have those courses out there and they're listed because we feel that they will be valuable to the students that come here to Ohio State and will help them to be successful students. So I think more of those recommended courses as kind of maybe an added value to the students to assure that they're a strong student coming in the door, but nothing that we necessarily consider in the application process.
Sure. How about you, Lamont?
It's just about going above and beyond. Don't do the bare minimum to get into dental school. Completing my prerequisites, these last 2 years I'm a coach. No, continue to press the envelope. Show me that you have a command of the sciences.
Great piece of advice. How about you, James?
Well, as part of our holistic process, we don't have any kind of weighted scoring system or ranking system, so that there's no sense of weight for recommended courses. But like Annette said, the recommended courses are there because we found that over time, individuals who have those courses are better prepared for the curriculum, but they're not evaluated as a separate component of the admissions process.
Great, thank you. And this is a good question, and I think the person, I'm not sure if the person means shadowing hours or volunteer hours, but they were asking how many volunteer hours should you, would you consider as a competitive amount? And I know that does vary from school to school, but James, what is your opinion on that?
We really don't have any guidelines on that. We're looking at the quality of the experience that you have and what it tells us about what you know about the profession and your exposure to the profession. So what becomes more important than just listing the hours and where you did these hours is what you can tell us about those experiences in your personal statement, in our supplemental application, or during your interview.
Great. Any further thoughts on that, Annette?
I say, well, echoing what James says, but just kind of a good way to think about it is quality, not quantity.
Great. And Lamont, any other thoughts?
Ditto. I would just add to that, have a variety of shadowing. And I don't just mean general versus specialist, but I also mean large practice versus small practice, urban versus rural. If you are a woman, you might want to shadow a woman. So different things of that nature. Just have a variety in your shadowing up.
Great. Thank you. So questions, I'm always curious about this. This is a question from a reapplicant. So I'm a reapplicant. Should I focus on, what are the things that I should focus on first and foremost? DAT, volunteering, shadowing? Lamont, why don't we start with you? Any advice for a reapplicant?
The best advice for a reapplicant is to contact a particular admissions officer. Whatever schools they're serious about, contact them, have a conversation with them. Let's talk about how we can strengthen your application. I personally don't talk with reapplicants about what I did wrong. I talk to them about how they can strengthen their application for a future cycle. So that's the first step and the biggest piece of advice I can give them. Don't try to figure it out on your own. Ask for help.
Right. Perfect. Thank you. James, any other thoughts on that?
What to do for a reapplicant is going to depend upon that reapplicant. For some people, it might be the academics. For others, it might be dental experience. If you have a 2.2 GPA, getting 1 million hours of community service is not going to make your application more competitive. So the first step, I think, is to really do an honest self-assessment of where are the areas that you need to strengthen your application. Secondly, don't reapply too quickly. Oftentimes, people will reapply before they've really done anything substantively different. And so we're looking at the same application. Critical for a reapplicant is that you want to show how you've made yourself a stronger, more competitive applicant since your last application. And you should be able to have some very concrete examples of steps you've taken. This may mean delaying a year or two before you reapply.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Annette, any further comments on that?
Echoing again what both of the gentlemen have said is, you know, one, contact the schools. Two, do that self-assessment. And, you know, I always say if you apply with the same application, chances are you're going to get the same result. So schools are really looking at what you've done since your last application. And like James said, every applicant is going to be different on those changes that they need to make. For some, it's retaking the DAT. Someone, it might be just the overall strengthening of their personal statements and their essays. So really do that self-assessment and reach out to the schools you're going to be reapplying to.
Great advice.
Rewrite all of your statements. Don't just cut and paste and move sentences around a little bit. We know that because we're looking at your road application. And get at least one new letter of recommendation. Even if it's from one of the same people, it should be a new letter that goes well with your new application.
And I would just add to that as well, listen. When you speak to admissions officers, listen to what they say. Again, we don't hold the cards, all truths, so talk to multiple admissions officers, but listen to what they say. You know, if you take the time to contact them, at least listen to their recommendations for what you need to do.
Perfect. Thank you. Very valuable information. So, question. If you have been out of school for several years, do you have to take advanced coursework or enter an advanced degree or post-bac program to be competitive? I think that's a very good question. Lamont, I have you on the screen, so you get to answer that first.
Okay. So it probably varies from school to school. Some schools have the hard, concrete 5-year rule on prerequisite coursework. Some schools have a more fluid rule on 5 years. I would not recommend, if someone has a command of the sciences and it clearly shows, I would not necessarily recommend that they take those classes. I personally would recommend that they take some advanced coursework. Absolutely.
Great.
Did that answer the question?
Yes. Annette, how about you? Any comments on that?
You know, Lamont said make sure you check the schools. Every schools have different requirements when it comes to timing on those prerequisites. And I think it depends on how far removed you are and how strong and confident you feel, as Lamont said, in your command of the sciences. You know, are you prepared to step into a professional program? Are you prepared to take that DAT? If it's been a while since you've taken organic chemistry, it may make sense to take a refresher course for some. For others, it may make sense to just do a self-refresher. You know yourself, you know your abilities, so do some self-assessment and see where you are. But we would never say to someone, no, you have to go back and get an advanced degree. You have to go back and do something extra. But if courses have timed out, or if it makes sense for you on a personal level to take either some upper level courses or some review courses, then yes, you'll need to do those things.
Great, thank you. And James, any thoughts?
Nothing to add. The gentleman from Carolina and the advisor from Ohio State answered the question beautifully.
Thanks. So this is, I like this question. So, you know, somebody on the webinar said, I'm a dental hygienist with an associate degree. Am I still a competitive applicant? How about we start with you, James?
Well, you can be if you do the prerequisites and the other coursework that's needed. A common misconception is that the coursework required to become a dental hygienist can transfer into the prerequisites for dental schools, and in most cases I don't think that's the case. You definitely are bringing something with you as far as direct experience, but you can't just put down that you were a dental hygienist. You still have to show that you have insight into the profession through that experience.
Right. Perfect. Lamont, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, check the schools again. We require BA or BS degree. So check with the schools to see what they require. Again, you do have added value. Again, do not devalue yourself or your training that you have thus far, but make sure you check with the schools as to what they will accept and what they will not accept.
Sure, absolutely. And how about you, Annette?
check with the schools. We'll accept someone without a bachelor's degree, but we have a minimum of 90 hours that are required. So, you know, three different schools may give you three different answers when it comes to kind of what you need to do in order to be considered. So I think when you're coming with that experience, like James said, make sure that you, you know, kind of put that best foot forward and show those experiences and show that you're knowledgeable when it comes to the dental field.
Yes, absolutely. All right, let's see. We have a few more here. Oh, this is a good one. So does showing manual dexterity skills and having experience in that area benefit the application? I think there's some, you know, misconceptions around manual dexterity and what role it plays. So I think elaborating on that a little bit would be great. You wanna talk about that, Annette?
Sure. So in your ADSAS application, there is an opportunity for you to highlight some of those things that you have done as an applicant to develop those manual dexterity skills. I've seen everything from I put on my own makeup to I work on cars with my father. So we see a wide variety, but be thoughtful in the information that you put there. It is something that we look at and that we consider when we're looking at the applicant. The other piece of the application that we look at that gives us some insight into that is the PAT. It is the one part of the application that does have direct correlation to performance in the clinic setting. So that's important. That's something that's important to us. But every school is going to look at it differently, and you know, take that as a part of their application in different ways. So again, check with the schools.
Absolutely. James, any thoughts on that?
No, I think Annette answered that one wonderfully.
Great. And Lamont, any further thoughts?
Nope.
You guys just answer all the questions so well. You know, one thing, and this is actually a question coming from me, thinking about all the questions that have been coming in, and the question about the person who's a dental hygienist who has an associate degree. You know, a lot of questions come in from community college students, and I'm not sure how many we have on the webinar, but, you know, do you have any just broad, general kind of guidance to provide students who are, you know, in community college and transitioning to a four-year institution? You know, what are the things they should be thinking about in their first or probably second year of community college if they know for sure that they want to go to dental school? Why don't we start with you, James?
Well, in California, the community college experience is very common amongst our applicants, and so it's something that we're accustomed to seeing. And I would say that one of the things we're looking at is when you transfer, the degree of rigor is generally considered to become much higher. So we do want to see improvement when you transfer to the four-year. Once you transfer, whenever possible, try and stay at the four-year institution to complete your coursework. We know that sometimes you may have to go back and take another course at the community college, but if it looks like you're reserving all the really challenging courses for the summers and going back to the community college, that's something that doesn't always fare well. We also consider that all coursework in the community college, by definition, is lower division. So sometimes individuals will go to a community college, especially if they were a non-science major, to take prerequisites. In order to be a more competitive applicant, we still would like to see some upper division biological science coursework taken at a four-year institution. And so those are, I guess, two or three of the main points.
Great, thank you. Lamont, any thoughts on that?
No, I think James hit it well. Again, just, you know, certainly you want to make sure that you have communication with the school, but if you are in second year at a community college, there are other things that you can certainly be looking into, like shadowing and volunteering, those types of things. But you want to make sure that you have at least contacted the school you're planning to transfer. Most of the schools will have a pre-health advisor. They're very important, and they will help guide you along the process as well and get you in the right classes that you need to be in.
Great, thanks. And Annette, any comments or advice you'd like to share?
The only piece of advice I guess I would add to that is kind of building upon what Lamont said about the pre-health advisor is look to see if the campus you're transferring to has an active predental organization. I think that's always a good resource once you get to campus. So take advantage of things like that on the the four-year institution's campus.
Great. Well, I think this might be our last question, depending on how long it takes us to answer that. We have a long list of questions, and for individuals who don't get their question answered on the webinar, please email us at godental@adia.org, and we'll try to get those questions answered, outside of the 1:30 time frame. So, the question, and I think it's a good one, is what makes or breaks an interview, and what's the best way to prepare? I think this is a good question that a lot of students are always interested in hearing about. So, Annette, I have you on the screen, so I'll give you this one first.
First impressions are lasting impressions. So, think about that impression that you want to make from the moment that you walk in the door, how you carry yourself, how you interact with others. I said it earlier, this is the beginning of your professional career. In many ways, this is your job interview. You're interviewing for your profession. What can make or break the interview? Don't come to the interview hungover. We had that happen. Just be aware of how people are seeing you, and I'm not just talking in the physical sense, but really just how you interact, how you communicate. As a future dental professional, your communication skills will be a big part of what you do day to day, interacting with patients and your staff, and so those are the kinds of things we're paying attention to in the interview. It's just not how well you answer the question, but really how well you communicate, how well you work with others. This is our opportunity to see that. So, like I said with the personal statement, put your best foot forward.
Great. Thanks very much, Annette. James, any comments?
Be yourself, like I said earlier, not who you think we want you to be. Answer the question that's asked, not the one that you want to answer, to make sure that you're giving the information they're seeking. And be prepared to ask good questions yourself. I think that when I'm doing a job interview, for example, the questions a prospective hire asks me oftentimes will tell me a lot more about them than the questions I ask them. So come with some good questions.
Absolutely. And Lamont, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, don't be a know-it-all. If yourself is the know-it-all, then don't be yourself. But most of the time, be yourself. Yeah, and just you don't ever want to be that applicant. So like James and Annette said, come with some good questions for the school. Do your homework on the school. Nothing pains me more than to have an applicant ask me something that's front and center on my home website.
Of course.
That tells me that you didn't do your homework. So, and my tone just got very serious. But make sure you do your homework on the school. That's very important.
Great. Okay. There's one more question that came in, so I'm going to slide it in real quick because I think it's an important one. It's a question that, if I'm out and talking to students about dentistry, they ask me this. What are your thoughts on non-science majors? This is a setback if you're applying to dental school? I think this is definitely the last question, but definitely I think worth addressing on this webinar. Lamont, I have you on the screen, so why don't you tackle that first?
Yeah, great. Great that you're not a science major. You don't have to be a biology or chemistry major. You add flavor to the class, if you will. Building a dental school, we have a saying, it's like creating or making wine. There are all types of grapes that make good wine. So we don't want prototypical or cookie cutter students. We want students that add value. Sometimes it's just like having more mature students who don't come straight out of undergrad.
Right. So
having different majors we value it the same way. It's a great thing.
Great, thank you. Annette, any comments on that?
I'll just echo what Lamont said. I mean, we don't say you have to be a biology or a chemistry major. We have students that come to us with a variety of majors or even a variety of advanced degrees. And it's that diversity of thought that really helps to shape the class and to make the experience a worthwhile one. So, find something you're passionate about and, do well in those science classes you take and get that foundation set. But if you're passionate about it and you enjoy it, it'll be reflected when you come to us.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, any final thoughts on that, James?
Like Lamont said, I think for non-science majors, perhaps go above and beyond and take upper division science coursework. That can help show your ability to perform at a higher level. Great.
Well, everyone, I really appreciate your time and your candor and the information you provided. We had some really great questions, attendees, and I truly appreciate that. I hope everyone found this as valuable as I certainly did. As I mentioned, if you didn't get your question answered, you can email us at godental@adia.org. We're happy to try to answer those questions the best that we can. I had two final plugs very quickly. If you're an international student on the webinar, we do have a webinar at 2 o'clock today, actually, and it's about the CAPID application that ADIA runs. So please check it out. You can find more information about it on the ADIA Go Dental events page. And last but not least, the other really important thing that I do this year is our in-person recruitment fair. So if there are a couple of schools that you know you want to go to, March 12th in Denver, Colorado, we have our recruitment fair. There'll be over 40 U.S. schools there and admissions representatives to talk to you one-on-one about their individual programs. A couple of the schools that are represented today will be there as well. So, if you have the chance to get out to Colorado or you're in the area, please, consider checking us out. It's a free event, so we'd really like to see you there. Again, panelists, thank you so much for being available today and talking to students. I know they found it extraordinarily valuable. I certainly did. And thank you, everyone, for giving us your time today, and we'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.